You lied to her. You lied about everything.
She needed to be protected.
Claire Hoffman had been a widow for 3 years when she decided to plant her first garden since her husband's death. But she never expected that asking her neighbor for advice about roses would lead to the kind of second chance at love she thought only happened to other people. At 46, she had convinced herself that her heart had already had its season until she met Thomas Chen and discovered that some loves are worth waiting a lifetime to bloom. Before we explore Claire's journey of rediscovering love and the gentle romance that blooms in her carefully tended garden, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Your support helps us bring you more heartwarming romantic stories every week. Now, let's step into Claire's world, where healing hearts and growing flowers teach us that it's never too late for a second spring. Claire Hoffman stood in her backyard on a crisp March morning, holding a cup of coffee and staring at the neglected flower beds that had once been her pride and joy. At 46, she had been a widow for 3 years, and the garden that she and her late husband Michael had lovingly cultivated together had become an overgrown reminder of everything she had lost when cancer took him at the much too young age of 48. The house in suburban Portland felt too large and too quiet most days, filled with memories of 22 years of marriage and the future plans that would never come to fruition. Claire had kept herself busy with her job as a high school English teacher, her book club, and various volunteer activities, but she had avoided the garden entirely, unable to face the physical reminder of the dreams she and Michael had shared. This spring felt different, though Claire couldn't quite explain why. Perhaps it was reaching the 3-year mark since Michael's death, or maybe it was the fact that her grief counseling group had been encouraging her to find new ways to honor Michael's memory while also creating space for her own future. Whatever the reason, Claire had woken up that morning with an unexpected desire to reclaim the garden and make it beautiful again. The task was daunting. 3 years of neglect had transformed the carefully planned flower beds into a tangle of weeds, dead plants, and overgrown bushes that bore little resemblance to the showcase garden she and Michael had once maintained together. Claire realized she would need help, both practical and emotional, to undertake such a significant project. Claire's next-door neighbor, Thomas Chen, had always maintained an impeccable garden that she had admired from her kitchen window during the dark years when she couldn't bear to tend her own garden. Thomas was recently retired from his career as a civil engineer, and he seemed to spend most of his time working outdoors, creating beautiful landscaping that changed with each season and always looked perfectly maintained. Claire had exchanged pleasantries with Thomas over the fence for the past few years, but she had never engaged in extended conversation with him. Her grief had made her withdrawn from social connections, and she had been focused on simply surviving each day rather than building new relationships. Thomas had always been respectful of her privacy while remaining friendly and available if she needed anything. Gathering her courage, Claire approached the fence that separated their properties and asked Thomas if he might have a few minutes to offer some advice about garden renovation. Thomas immediately put down his pruning shears and gave Claire his full attention, clearly pleased to be asked for help with the subject he was passionate about. Thomas was a soft-spoken man in his early 50s, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He had an understated warmth and the patient manner of someone who was comfortable with silence and thoughtful conversation. As they walked through Claire's overgrown garden together, Thomas asked thoughtful questions about what she hoped to achieve and what plants had been successful in the space previously. Claire found herself sharing more information about her gardening history than she had intended, including stories about the plants she and Michael had chosen together and the plans they had made for expanding certain sections. Thomas listened without judgment or awkward sympathy,
focusing on the practical aspects of garden restoration while acknowledging the emotional significance of the project. Thomas's assessment of Claire's garden was both realistic and encouraging. He explained that much of the underlying structure was still sound, and that with proper cleanup, soil amendment, and strategic replanting, the garden could be restored to its former beauty within a single growing season. He offered to help with the more labor-intensive aspects of the project, mentioning that he enjoyed gardening work and would welcome the opportunity to collaborate with someone who shared his interest in plants and design. Claire accepted Thomas's offer of help with gratitude and some trepidation. She hadn't worked closely with another person on a creative project since Michael's death, and she wasn't sure how she would handle the emotional challenges of rebuilding something that had been so connected to her marriage. However, Thomas's practical approach and obvious expertise made her feel confident that he would respect both her vision for the garden and her need to move at her own pace. Their collaboration began the following weekend with a thorough cleanup of the overgrown areas. Thomas arrived with professional quality tools and a systematic approach that made the overwhelming task feel manageable. He worked efficiently but never rushed, taking breaks to discuss plant identification, soil conditions, and design possibilities. Claire was impressed by Thomas's knowledge and his teaching ability. He explained not just what needed to be done, but why certain approaches were effective, helping Claire understand the science behind successful gardening. His patient instruction reminded her of why she had enjoyed learning about plants with Michael, and she began to feel some of her old enthusiasm for gardening returning. As they worked together, Claire learned more about Thomas's background and interests. He had been married for 25 years before his wife Linda died in a car accident 4 years ago. He had moved to Portland to be closer to his daughter and grandchildren, and he had thrown himself into gardening as a way of creating beauty and finding peace during his own grief journey. Thomas's experience with widowhood created a natural understanding between them that didn't require extensive explanation or awkward conversations about loss. They could acknowledge each other's grief without dwelling on it, focusing instead on the therapeutic value of working with soil and plants and creating something beautiful together. Over the following weeks, Claire and Thomas established a routine of working in the garden together on weekend mornings. They would start early to avoid the heat of the day, taking breaks to share coffee and discuss their progress. The garden began to take shape under their combined efforts, with cleared beds, improved soil, and the first new plantings beginning to establish themselves.
Claire found that she looked forward to Saturday mornings in a way she hadn't anticipated. Thomas's quiet presence and steady work ethic were comforting, and their conversations ranged from practical gardening topics to books, travel experiences, and observations about life in their neighborhood. Claire realized that she had been lonely for adult companionship that wasn't centered on her status as a widow or her need for support during grief. Thomas seemed to enjoy their collaboration equally, often mentioning ideas he had for certain sections of the garden and asking Claire's opinion about plant choices and design decisions. He treated her as an equal partner in the project rather than someone who needed to be helped or managed, and his respect for her input helped Claire regain confidence in her own aesthetic judgment and gardening knowledge. As spring progressed into early summer, Claire's garden began to show the results of their careful attention. New perennials were establishing themselves, the vegetable section was producing its first harvest, and the overall design was emerging as something that honored the garden's original beauty while reflecting Claire's current needs and preferences. The transformation of the garden was paralleling changes in Claire's own emotional state. Working with Thomas had reminded her of the joy that came from creating beauty and sharing projects with someone who appreciated both the process and the results. She was sleeping better, feeling more energetic, and beginning to think about future plans that extended beyond simply managing her grief and maintaining her daily routines. Thomas's influence on Claire's life extended beyond their gardening collaboration. He had recommended books that he thought she might enjoy, shared recipes from his own kitchen garden, and introduced her to his daughter Sarah and her children during a casual backyard barbecue that had evolved naturally from their weekend work sessions. Sarah was a warm, intelligent woman in her 30s who clearly adored her father and was pleased to see him developing a friendship with someone who shared his interests and appreciated his gentle personality. The grandchildren, ages 8 and 10, were delighted by Claire's teacher background and her willingness to answer their endless questions about plants, insects, and outdoor science projects. Claire found herself becoming part of Thomas's extended family circle in ways that felt natural rather than forced. She attended birthday parties and casual gatherings, contributing her teacher skills to homework help and her developing gardening expertise to family projects. The social connections were healing for Claire, reminding her that she could build meaningful relationships that weren't defined by her widowed status. By midsummer, Claire realized that her feelings for Thomas were evolving beyond friendship and collaboration. She was attracted to his thoughtfulness, his competence, and his ability to be present in the moment without constantly referencing past losses or future worries. Thomas had helped her rediscover parts of herself that had been dormant during her grief, and she found herself hoping that their relationship might develop into something more personal and romantic. Claire's recognition of her romantic feelings for Thomas created both excitement and anxiety. She hadn't thought about dating or relationships since Michael's death, and she felt uncertain about whether she was ready for the emotional complexity of a new romantic partnership. She also worried about whether Thomas saw her as anything more than a friend and collaborating partner. The question of Thomas's romantic interest in Claire was answered during a warm July evening when they were watering the garden together and discussing plans for fall planting. Thomas mentioned that he had been thinking about asking Claire if she might be interested in having dinner with him at a nice restaurant, as a way of celebrating their successful garden collaboration and exploring whether they might enjoy each other's company in settings beyond their shared yard work. Claire's response was immediate and positive, though she was touched by Thomas's careful, respectful approach to asking her out. He clearly understood that dating after loss was complex and emotional, and he was willing to move at whatever pace felt comfortable for both of them. Their first official date was dinner at a quiet French restaurant that Thomas had been wanting to try. The evening was relaxed and enjoyable, with conversation that flowed easily from topics they had covered during their gardening work to more personal subjects like their families, their careers, and their hopes for the future. Claire learned that Thomas had been attracted to her from early in their gardening collaboration, but that he had been unsure about whether she was ready for or interested in a romantic relationship. He had decided to focus on being a good friend and collaborator while hoping that their connection might eventually develop into something deeper. Thomas's approach to their potential relationship was patient and considerate, reflecting his understanding of the emotional complexities involved in dating after the death of a spouse. He made it clear that he was interested in building something meaningful with Claire, but that he was willing to let their relationship develop at whatever pace felt right for both of them. Claire found Thomas's thoughtfulness both attractive and reassuring. She had worried that dating again would feel like a betrayal of Michael's memory, or a rushed attempt to fill the void left by his death. Instead, her growing relationship with Thomas felt like a natural extension of the friendship and partnership they had already established. Over the following months, Claire and Thomas's relationship deepened through shared activities, extended conversations, and increasing emotional intimacy. They discovered compatibility in their approaches to life, their values regarding family and community,
and their mutual appreciation for simple pleasures like good food, interesting books, and beautiful surroundings. Thomas was patient with Claire's occasional moments of grief or uncertainty about moving forward romantically, understanding that healing from loss was not a linear process and that her love for Michael would always be part of who she was. Claire appreciated Thomas's security in himself and his willingness to accept that their relationship was built on their current connection, rather than trying to replace what either of them had lost. Their relationship was tested when Claire's stepdaughter Ashley visited for Thanksgiving, bringing her own complicated feelings about Claire's new romantic partnership. Ashley had been very close to her father, Michael, and seeing Claire with another man triggered her own unresolved grief and protective feelings about preserving her father's memory. Claire handled Ashley's concerns with honesty and sensitivity, acknowledging that her relationship with Thomas didn't diminish her love for Michael or her commitment to preserving his memory. She explained that Thomas had helped her heal and grow in ways that honored Michael's wishes for her happiness, and that loving again didn't mean loving less. Thomas's response to meeting Ashley and navigating her concerns was gracious and understanding. He recognized that blended family relationships after loss were complex, and he was willing to give Ashley time to adjust to his presence in Claire's life, while demonstrating through his actions that he respected Michael's memory and Claire's ongoing relationship with her stepdaughter. By Christmas, Ashley had come to appreciate Thomas's positive impact on Claire's life and his genuine care for her well-being. The holiday gathering that included Thomas, his daughter Sarah, and her family, Claire and Ashley, felt like a natural blending of families that honored everyone's relationships and histories. Claire realized during the holiday season that she had successfully created a new life that incorporated her past with Michael while embracing new possibilities with Thomas. The garden they had restored together was dormant for the winter, but it represented the growth and renewal that were occurring in both their lives. Thomas's proposal came the following spring, exactly 1 year after they had first begun working in the garden together. He chose a moment when they were planting new rose bushes, presenting Claire with an engagement ring that incorporated a small garden theme in its design. His proposal was simple and heartfelt, acknowledging their shared journey through loss and healing while expressing his hope that they could continue growing together for many years to come. Claire's acceptance was immediate and joyful, though she was moved to tears by the symbolism of being proposed to in the garden that had brought them together and represented their shared commitment to nurturing beautiful things. The timing felt perfect, marking the completion of their garden restoration and the beginning of their official commitment to building a life together. Their wedding was held in Claire's backyard garden in late summer, with the space they had created together serving as a perfect backdrop for their celebration. Claire wore a dress that was elegant but garden-appropriate, reflecting her evolution from grieving widow to confident woman ready for new adventures. Thomas wore a suit that made him look handsome and distinguished while remaining true to his understated, practical personality. The ceremony was attended by family and close friends who had witnessed their relationship develop and who understood the significance of their commitment to each other. The vows they exchanged acknowledged their past losses while expressing gratitude for the love they had found together and their commitment to supporting each other's continued growth and healing. After their honeymoon, Claire and Thomas settled into married life that successfully balanced their individual needs with their shared interests and goals. They continued their gardening collaboration, expanding their efforts to include community volunteer work at local parks and schools. Their expertise and partnership made them valuable collaborators and mentors to neighborhood beautification projects and gardening education programs. Claire's teaching career took on new dimensions as she incorporated more environmental and agricultural education into her English curriculum, often bringing Thomas in as a guest expert to share his engineering and horticulture knowledge with her students. Their marriage had created professional as well as personal synergies that benefited both their individual careers and their shared community involvement. Thomas's retirement allowed him to be flexible and supportive regarding Claire's teaching schedule and her commitment to her students. His presence in her life provided stability and companionship that enhanced Claire's effectiveness as an educator, while also giving her emotional support during challenging periods of the school year. Their second spring as a married couple brought new challenges and opportunities as they planned ambitious expansions to their garden and considered larger community projects that could benefit from their combined skills and experience. They had become known in their neighborhood and gardening community as a couple whose expertise and generous spirit made them valuable collaborators and mentors. Claire and Thomas's relationship had matured into a partnership that honored both their individual strengths and their shared values. They had learned to navigate the complexities of blended families, seasonal depression, and the ongoing process of grief while building something beautiful and sustainable together. Standing in their garden on their second wedding anniversary, surrounded by plants they had chosen and nurtured together, Claire reflected on the journey that had brought her from a grieving widow, avoiding her backyard, to a happily remarried woman whose garden was featured in the local newspaper's home and garden section. Claire realized that her second spring had been about more than just finding romantic love again. Thomas had helped her rediscover her own capacity for growth, creativity, and joy, while she had helped him find new purpose and family connection after his own period of loss and adjustment. Their love story had begun with a request for gardening advice and had grown into a partnership that encompassed every aspect of their lives. They had learned that second chances at love were possible at any age, and that the most beautiful relationships were often those that grew slowly, carefully tended, and allowed to develop according to their own natural rhythm. Thomas had shown Claire that it was possible to love again without diminishing the love she had shared with Michael, and that honoring the past while embracing the future required courage, patience, and the right partner who understood the complexity of building relationships after loss. Claire Hoffman-Shen had thought her heart had already had its season when Michael died, but Thomas had taught her that love could bloom again when the conditions were right and the gardener was patient enough to nurture new growth. Their marriage was proof that some of life's most beautiful flowers were those that bloomed in maturity, carefully tended by experienced hands and rooted in deep understanding of what it meant to love, lose, and find the courage to love again. In the end, Claire learned that second springs were not about replacing what had been lost, but about creating space for new growth while honoring the deep roots that made such growth possible. Her garden had taught her that the most resilient plants were often those that had weathered difficult seasons and emerged stronger, more beautiful, and more deeply rooted than ever before. The widow's second spring had become a celebration of life's capacity for renewal, love's ability to bloom again, and the remarkable healing that was possible when two people who understood loss chose to plant seeds of hope together and tend them with patient, loving care.